Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off once again, and we have a week unlike any other at this point. Now, if you've been listening all along, you'll know that we take a lot of pride in exploring the backside of sports, the business end of sports. That doesn't make it much better. Regardless, we spend a lot of time trying to show everyone out there who's a fan of the traditional day-to-day sports what it's like to work behind the scenes. In our mind, there's no one better to do that than one of the godfathers of the radio broadcasting world, especially in Canada, Bob McCowan. Now, Bob McCowan has founded Fadoo Productions, and if you've been paying attention to the end of this podcast, or the beginning if you're watching on YouTube, the sign-off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions, along with Sad Styles Productions. So we were so happy to have him on and be able to talk to him and bend his ear. Anyone who's just starting out in this business, if on your 6th or so episode you get the chance to sit down with Bob McCowan, you take that every single time you can get it. Now, obviously, we spend a lot of time talking about podcasting in general. He's relatively new to this world, as are we here at the sign-off. But one other thing that we want to focus on is his involvement with sports beyond the scope of him being a broadcaster. He's done quite a bit. He's spoken to many legends. His stories about Muhammad Ali are absolutely not something you'd want to miss. So I don't want to delay any longer. This one is not about me. It's about the person who founded the production company under which we operate, and a fantastic interview himself. You know him and you love him. It's Bob McCowan. We will see you guys after the break. Welcome back, and thank you so much for this special guest that we have. I know I say that at just about the beginning of every episode, even if it's just you, Dad. It's you and me, and you're special in my mind. We have with us the founder of Fadoo Productions. You can find his podcast, the Bob McCowan podcast, over wherever you get your podcasts. We, as the sign-off, are also a member of his production company, Fadoo Productions, very proud member of that. And he's here as, he was originally one of the godfathers of Canadian commentary in sports, and now one of the godfathers of Canadian podcasting in sports, Bob McCowan.
I'm not sure about that. Hello, boys. How are you?
Good. Not too bad. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. Look, it's been a fun ride so far. We at the sign-off have been slightly earlier or later than you in starting the whole podcast train, but you spent a good chunk of years going on the radio and only recently moved over to podcasting. How's it been treating you? I think it was about June or so of last year that you started yours.
Yeah, in a different format. We started off doing 5-minute daily podcasts where people could ask me questions. So we invited people to participate through social media, and then I think in the first day we got 6 months worth of people.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it was crazy. And so we started down that road, and I don't even remember how many episodes we did. 25, 30, 50, I don't remember, of the 5-minute version. And quite frankly, I was uneducated in terms of podcasts. And
that's like my dad in terms of mathematics.
Unconvinced of the viability of it long term. And I just kept getting talked into it over and over and over again. So I started with this 5-minute thing. And, 2 things happened. Number one, I got tired of doing it, to be honest with you. Answering questions when I spent my whole life asking them.
I was going to say, what did you like more, asking or answering the questions?
Much more comfortable asking questions
fair.
Than I am answering them. And the second thing was I started doing some serious homework about this and contacted a bunch of people that I whose opinion I respected. And so we abandoned the 5-minute routine, changed the name of it, and essentially relaunched as what was originally planned to be about a 30-minute podcast a day. Now, I know that podcasts, you can do podcasts for as long as you want. You can do a 24-hour podcast if you wanted to.
Right.
I just thought the 30 minutes was a a good time. Living in Toronto, I think people get into their cars, they want to listen to something. 30 minutes seemed a reasonable amount of time. That may not be your full drive, but it's a good hunk of chunk of it. And so we kind of settled on that. And then I brought John Shannon in because, of course, I'm obliged to make sure that Shannon makes a couple bucks.
Take him under your wing a little bit.
Well, as I have for years and years and years. And so it was like this, the grown son I never had.
Well, ask my dad. That's not it's not so pleasurable from his perspective.
Well, no comment. So Shannon and I started doing it. We started at 30 minutes, and then as often as not, it was 35, and then it got to 40, and we did a couple ones that were an hour. And as a podcast, of course, you're not under the same restrictions as you are in broadcasting.
Right.
So you can do as long as you want or as short as you want.
And that's as the person recording as well as the person listening. I mean, that's one of the benefits. You talk about someone's drive to work. Now they don't have to schedule their drive around when you're going to go live on air. Instead, it's whenever they want to get in the car, everyone's hearing the same thing. Now, one thing I find very interesting about you, especially later, more currently, you talk a lot about the business of sports. There was a recent article about December of last year. I'm not sure if I'm going to get the author's name correct. Simon Haupt? Is that?
Yeah, Haupt.
Yeah, a really good article, very in-depth, that kind of, I don't want to say exposed, but just brought to light a lot of the things that you've been going over the past year or so. And you had a quote in there that I found particularly applicable to what we're going to be talking about today. In regards to the business of sports, you said, you know who I talk to in regards to your audience? The 55-year-old millionaire works on Bay Street. In my mind, that's my target audience. What's he interested in? He's a business guy. He's interested in business. He's interested in economics. He's interested in behind the scenes. Now, that's as our mentality here, sort of our mantra is to explore the business of sports. Was that always your intention? Or was your intention at first to just make it so that sports were applicable to everyone and you grew into that role? And how much is that focus of business now over just talking about what happened last night in a hockey game?
Well, I almost never talk about what happened last night in a hockey game. I couldn't care less, and I don't think the audience can care less. Or, I mean, if they cared last night. They don't care the next day.
Sure.
Look, and I can't tell you that I had this specific concept when I started 40 years ago, but I grew into it. And you gotta kiss a bunch of frogs before you land the princess.
Sure.
Or the other way around, I guess it is supposedly. And so, yeah, I interviewed a lot of athletes in the early days, and they had nothing to say. They all go to media. They all go to media school. They all learn to answer questions without saying anything. They're just exactly the same as politicians.
Right.
Ask a politician a question. He'll talk for 2 minutes, but he won't. You'll forget what the question was because he won't even come close to answering it.
That's fair. I mean, they already they have that like cliched thing of an athlete saying, "Well, it's gut check time," or "You got to get pucks deep," or something like that. Like it always ends up feeling like the same.
It's all
interview.
the same crap,
right?
Over and over and over again. So what I did is I basically told all my producers, get rid of those guys. I don't want to talk to those guys anymore. So, what I also found, and again, over time, and not by looking necessarily, was that former athletes, as soon as athletes hang up their sweater for the last time, they suddenly become a different person.
Right.
Suddenly much more open. At least in terms of generically speaking. I mean, I can't say that for every one of them. Some of them will always revert back to the mentality they had when they were playing. But the older an athlete is, the further away from the game he is, the more inclined he is to observe it as an outsider,
right,
and rationally, reasonably. And so, to this day, I will still have former athletes on. Not anyone, just because they're an athlete.
Right.
And there are a lot of programs that do that. They have to have demonstrated to me in some way, shape, or form that they're capable of carrying on a reasonably intelligent conversation.
That's fair, yeah.
But from that standpoint, yeah, I will talk to former athletes. And I'm always happy to talk to people who are involved in the business of sport. Whether it's owners, general managers, even coaches, investors. I mean, we did Greg Cosell this morning. Now,
right,
you probably don't know who Greg is, but you probably recognize his last name.
Cosell.
His uncle was Howard Cosell.
Okay.
And Greg have been involved with NFL Films for about 40 years.
Mm.
And, I'd never met Greg before, never talked to him before, so I had no real idea where the conversation was going to go. And it turned out to be a fascinating conversation.
Right.
Because what he does is essentially dissects film,
mm-hmm,
in terms of scouting.
Oh, okay. So not films as in ESPN 30 for 30. This is game footage.
Oh, no, they do that too.
Okay.
NFL Films. He works for NFL Films, the NFL Films. And that's
Okay.
principally what they do is they do documentaries.
Awesome.
Sports documentaries, almost always NFL documentaries. But this is one of the tasks that they perform is they do, and especially going into the draft. Now, he does this for NFL Films. He doesn't do it for outside interest for coaches or general managers in trying to find players in the draft. He does it for NFL Films and the kinds of projects that they're going to be producing. And I just found it a completely fascinating conversation. The kind of in-depth, behind-the-scenes stuff that I wouldn't even have thought to look for.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we want to bring to the table as well with our podcast. You know, everyone has access to, like you said, whatever happened the night before, but we're more focused on the things that people don't even know that they want to know about sports, and it's all in the back end. And that's one thing, again, that's fascinated us about the way you carry on your conversations. There's a different demographic than just a sports fan, and that's why we figured this partnership with Fadoo was so amicable. Now, I want to talk, I know you said, and I'm sorry to do this to you, that you're more comfortable asking the questions than being asked the questions, but I like to take the opportunity to get to know the man behind the glasses, so to speak, as often as we can. Now, you started working for CKFH, I think would have been one of your first notable jobs in the industry as a salesperson, correct?
Well, I actually started with CFTR, which is now known as 680 News.
Okay.
CFTR was a top 40 station. Back in those days, it was Chum and 680 that had the two top 40 signals. And then wound up taking a job in Sarnia, Ontario, of all places. And I was in broadcast sales. I was a golf pro at the time.
Right.
And looking for, if you're a golf professional in the wintertime or in the summertime here, you're looking for a winter job. And I'd done a bunch of things. And I had a member who sold advertising time. And he says, "Why don't you sell advertising time?" And I said, "Well, sure, I'll try anything for one winter." And went to 680 News, and they basically handed me the yellow pages and said, "Here you go." And of course, I was a complete and utter failure. and then and I was on commission, so I didn't get paid anything.
Right.
Sold nothing. Didn't sell a damn thing. And then they said, "We've got an opening in our radio station we own in Sarnia, and they'll pay you a salary." And I'm not ashamed to tell you, my salary was $600 a month.
Okay.
That was my salary. And I said, "Giddy up." And packed up my Dodge Challenger.
Ooh, that's a nice one. That's a throwback.
Drove to Sarnia. Showed up there with a full-length faux fur coat, long hair, full beard, and white clogs with blue butterflies painted on the front.
Oh my God.
And
did you make a stop at Salvation Army before going, or what happened there?
That was me. That was me back then. And I basically showed up as this guy from Toronto. And, "Hey, I'm here." And they all thought they'd lost their minds. They were seeing things.
Was this an on-air role that you were coming off of?
No, I was selling advertising.
So at what point?
I had no aspiration to be on air. I never had any aspiration to be on air.
That was going to be my next question. So when you're starting as in sales, essentially, you have no concept of what's about to come. And look, for $600 a month, we see your screen, and if you're watching on YouTube, you see the screen as well. That's a home office, and you're not ashamed to talk about the selling price of your current living situation, correct? You want to tell the listener what you managed to get? It's a little bit more than $600 a month. Are we willing to go there?
Well, yeah, I just sold the house for $10 million.
Nothing. So how many months would you have had to work at $600 a month to be able to afford that?
I'd never be able. The answer to that. I'd never been able to afford it. But again, you got to remember too that this was 1970s.
Right.
So. I actually lived okay.
Sure. No, yeah.
I had a one-bedroom apartment in Sarnia, and I fed myself and put gas in the car and did what I had to do back then. Anyway, so I wound up staying a year for reasons that are completely inexplicable. And then they actually fired me, which was a blessing.
Sure.
And I came back to Toronto, and I got offered a couple of jobs in advertising sales, and one of them was by CKFH, which was Foster Hewitt's station. Mm-hmm. And Foster was still alive at the time. And I'll tell the story as briefly as I can. And while I was in Sarnia, with almost nothing to do in the evening,
Sure.
I'd go into the radio station and goof around in the production room. So I'd record myself, play disc jockey and whatever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And because I was in sales, I actually had clients by that point, and one of them said to me, "Will you do our commercials for us?" And I thought, me? I don't even know. I have no idea how to do that.
Wow. Okay.
But I said, "Okay, sure." So I went in one night and I scribbled something down, and the advertiser was Merle Norman Cosmetics. So it wasn't even targeted at guys. It was a female product. So I tried to do the, low voice, sexy kind of presentation.
Sure.
Which I had no skills at. And one by one, the other clients said, "Hey, do my commercial, do my commercial." So, but that's as far as I got. I come to Toronto, and of course, that's not even in you don't even talk about that.
Right.
But I'd had that little taste. And I played disc jockey, for fun when I was in Sarnia. So at one point, I went to and sales. I was not the least bit interested in it. I just kind of got stuck in it, and I kept saying, "Next year I'm going to go back to the golf business."
Right.
And I went to the sales manager, who also happened to be the sports director, who also happened to do play-by-play of Toronto Maple Leaf hockey, Ron Hewitt.
Okay.
And I said to him, "Ron, I don't want to do this anymore." I said, I want to be on air, so I'm going to go to some peanut whistle radio station in Aurelia or someplace, and I'm going to see if I can be a sportscaster, because I'd like to try that.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you can't." And I said, "Ron, you don't have this, you haven't figured this out." I said, "I'm quitting. It's not your choice. You can't tell me I can't quit." And he says, "Well, no, you can't quit, because if you really want to be on air, I'll put you on air here."
Wow.
Okay.
So the deal he struck with me was that I would do 5 sportscasts a day at 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning, 12:30 in the afternoon, and 4:30 and 5:30 in the evening. And in between times, I would continue to sell advertising.
Now, what year would this have been?
Boy, that's a harder one. I want to say 1973.
Okay, so this is before, because
Before everything.
this is before everything, and so
This is before everything.
you were put on air at this point.
Yeah.
Now
He was dumb enough to put me on air with no audition tape, no idea, no nothing.
we're doing the same thing. We've
In
never even heard of you.
Toronto.
Yeah.
And this is in Toronto. This is the largest market in the country, and now the 4th largest market in North America. So this is a unique and rare opportunity. And of course, I did everything I could to screw it up, because I was terrible on air at the beginning. And I remember him calling me one day, and after I did a sportscast where I just butchered it. I was bumbling and stumbling all over the place. And he called me and he said, "If you do one more of those, you're gone." And fortuitously, I didn't.
Fortuitous. The
And
word of
that's
the
how I
day.
got my start in broadcasting. And then a few months later, I went to him and I said, "Look, this sales stuff is just awful. I don't want to do this anymore." And I don't remember if simultaneously or not, I said, "Why don't we do a sports talk show?"
Mm-hmm.
Because I had started to listen to a guy by the name of Pete Franklin,
Okay.
who was on 3WE in Cleveland. And their signal came into Toronto at night. And Franklin did a nightly sports talk show where he talked to fans. Like, sports talk in those days was phone-in.
Right. Right.
And for inexplicable reasons, Hewitt gave me the right to do it. And we started doing it one day a week. We did it on Monday nights. And then we did Mondays and Fridays. And then eventually it morphed into 7 days or 5 days a week. And I was doing the sportscasts at the same time. And the talk show was on at 10 o'clock at night. So talk about long days. And then eventually I gave up the sportscast during the day. And if I remember correctly, I hired Mark Hebscher initially to do the sportscast.
Okay.
And my first producer on the radio talk show was a 19-year-old snot-nosed punk who worked in the back shop at Eaton's, who bugged me forever and ever sending me stats about sports that I didn't care about. And I wound up hiring him as my producer, and his name was Mark Askin.
Oh,
And I don't know if you
geez.
know Mark,
Yeah.
but Mark is the longtime senior producer of Maple Leaf Hockey and Hockey Night in Canada and Molson Hockey and all kinds of stuff. So he went on to have a pretty good career on his own too, but he was my first producer.
Oh, wow.
And the train of people that have come through my show has been extraordinary.
Who's been one of your favorite people to work with?
As a producer?
Sure, or just someone who you've consistently had on air. And this is not to disparage any of the people you're not going to mention, but someone who you've just
that
always...
would be inevitable, wouldn't it? Because they would all, I think, like to think that they were the favorite.
Of course.
I know I would.
Yeah.
I've been on your show a couple of times. Maybe it's
I'll
me.
probably.
Yeah.
I'll plead the fifth on that.
Okay,
one.
that's
I
fair.
I don't think I have a favorite. Look, you get along with people to varying degrees.
You've had
There were people
non-favorites.
Say that again, Brian.
You've had people that weren't your favorites,
Oh yeah,
and you plead the fifth on that one too.
Yeah.
the people that I liked, but on a daily basis clashed with all the time, and didn't have any relationship with off air. Well, I will say this: Jim Hunt was one.
Oh, really?
I respected Shaky. The audience liked Shaky. The show was successful at that time. But did we get along off air? Hell no.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't know that.
So, no, we didn't fight. We just had no relationship off air.
Right.
Bill Waters and I were extremely friendly, but we rarely socialized off air. And that wasn't because we didn't like each other, I don't think. I think we were just different guys who had
Sure.
different priorities. When the mic was turned off, he went his way, I went my way.
When it boils down to it, it's a coworker, right? I mean, there are plenty of coworkers that I've worked with that I'm not going to grab a beer with after, not because I dislike them, but just, we have different priorities, different places in life. Now, one thing that I found fascinating, I want to take us up a little bit to 1988. Leading up to your premiere of Primetime Sports in 1989. Now, the first episode of Primetime Sports, tell me if I'm right about this. Is it true that you recorded it essentially a year before it aired?
No.
That's not true.
Not true.
So the episode of 1989 that aired, I believe would have been the airtime of Primetime Sports, correct? Was 89?
I came back in summer of 88.
Right.
And we did my show before I left. I moved to Vegas. When the show I done before that, the talk show was called Talking of Sports.
Okay.
And when I came back, Bill Waters was the co-host of the show that I came back to, which was also called Talking of Sports. Mm-hmm. And for reasons that I can't explain and don't remember, somebody decided we should change the name of the show. And I don't know why. Maybe it was because it was moved to a different time. That probably was the answer. But anyway, it became Primetime Sports.
Right.
And then ultimately, Primetime Sports was used as the vehicle to launch The Fan.
Right.
But that didn't happen until 1993.
Right.
So I was the first voice on The Fan when we unveiled the first all-sports radio station in Canada.
Yeah, and fairly synonymous, I think, with the Fan in general. I mean, that's...
And coincidentally, was around the same time that Frameworth started up.
There you
and
go.
That's how we got to know each
Well,
other.
let's go into that a little bit. Let's because I do want to pick up later on post 93 once we start to get into the Rogers takeover and the proposal to simulcast Primetime Sports. We'll get into that in a little bit.
I thought you wanted to talk about my fantastic sports memorabilia collection.
Well, this is what I want to get into here. So I want to.
You better hurry up.
I want to talk about.
Wait a second. You know what, Bob? I've known you for many years now, and I've never heard some of those stories. So, unbeknownst to you, there are people that are interested in how you came about.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, no, I mean, you made it there.
Happy to help.
I think it's a fascinating story, and there's a lot more to be told. But let's move on.
Yeah, so the memorabilia collection, as far as Frameworth is involved, began with the Blue Jays winning the World Series, I believe, was the first piece that you, Dad, had mentioned you hand-delivered to Bob.
I don't remember the circumstances, Bob, that I had found your
I might
ad.
be wrong, but I think it's sitting here somewhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had done a piece.
It's very weird. I pulled it out of the archives just the other day.
Well, you know what?
And it was sitting on my chair over here.
$10 million house, things can get lost in there pretty easily. You may never see that thing again. I don't know.
But you know what? I remember you had a house down just off Yonge Street in Davisville in that area. And for some reason...
Oh, I've lived a few places.
I don't know how I came to first meet you. I somehow on the phone or...
Oh, you probably called me and bugged me.
You maybe needed some framing done or something. Anyways, I dropped...
Well, I don't remember either, Brian.
Yeah.
But I know it's been a long time.
But I remember knocking on your door. There was somebody you were talking to at the time, and then I had that piece signed by Dwayne Ward or something, and I wanted to show you, what a good piece of memorabilia looked like.
Right.
And we sat and talked for a while, and that was the beginning. When the
It
first
might
time...
not have been Dwayne Ward. You know who it might have been?
Who's
It
that?
might have been Wendell Clark.
Well, no, this
You
was
had
a Blue Jay.
You had a piece that you gave me that was it wasn't a photograph actually. It was a print of a painting, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember it
Yes.
with all the stuff that you've gone through, but of Wendell Clark, and I still have it actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, well, I have basically everything that I've gotten from you, through you, whatever.
So quickly, because I want to talk about a project as well that Frameworth did work on you with regards to Muhammad Ali, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But before we do that, you as a fan of sports, I'm assuming you got into this industry because first and foremost you were a fan, or just someone who liked to play disc jockey when no one else was around. But you clearly have a very large affinity towards sports. Was memorabilia big to you at that time? Was that something that was? Oh, it wasn't. Now, have you since grown into that?
I was being facetious. I really don't have a big collection of anything.
Right.
For whatever reason, I've never asked for a single autograph, I don't think, in my life. I've never really collected things. I've accumulated things.
Fair.
Well,
And those are two entirely different things.
Yeah.
Here's to this point. We were at Bob's place the other day.
Yeah.
And we went into the office that I think he's sitting in now. And back when Sidney Crosby got his gold medal goal,
2010. Yeah.
I designed this commemorative jersey and a beautiful box, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, Bob, you got to have
right
one
there,
of
Brian.
these. So I saw it sitting on the counter there.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't have a lot of, as you saw it, there isn't a lot of memorabilia around. But I said, geez, Bob, I gave that to you when it was worth about $600. He said, yeah. He says, what's it worth today? I said, so it's about $2,500.
Bit of a change.
And now they're almost sold out. There's like 10 left. So he didn't even realize what he was sitting on. I said, you could sell it if you want. No, I'll keep it.
Yeah, that feels like one of the stories. As someone who accumulates instead of collects, are you now getting into that at all, or is that something that's kind of off the table for you?
It's just not in my nature. I always felt uncomfortable in interviewing these people and then asking for an autograph.
Sure.
Or take a photo. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows I've done. I can't tell you how many athletes I've interviewed. It is well into the thousands, more than 10,000 shows.
Mm-hmm.
And you could argue, I have 5 or 6 guests. When I used to do the radio show, I had 5 or 6 guests on a show. So you could be talking 50,000 guests.
Wow.
No, obviously it's repeats, but
Yeah.
never asked for a photograph, never asked for an autograph.
Now, do you think?
But being of the profile that I had, things came along. It was not uncommon for me to go into the radio station, and there'd be a couple of things sitting there.
Sure.
Whether it's a Hockey Canada jersey from the Hockey Canada people, or whether it's something from your dad, from Brian, whether it could be from anybody.
Do you, in spite of the fact that you were accumulating rather than collecting, do you have something that stands out as your favorite? Or the most valuable, one or the other?
Well, I don't know value on anything. I've never bought anything. I've never sold anything.
Sure.
Although now with this move coming, I'm trying to downside. There may be some selling going on.
There you go.
I'll take the
'Cause
barbecue.
I mean, and your dad will tell you the same thing because he's been in my house many times. I know you've been here, but I have really one place where I put up things that pertain to me or things that are important to me for my career, and that's in my office.
Right. Which we're
And then
seeing
there are-
right now. Yeah.
There are a couple of other pictures that are downstairs by the pool table that we wanted to talk about, and that's the 2 Muhammad Ali pictures
Right.
I'd love to
that
talk
sat
about
around
those.
for 20 years, and we did nothing with until I showed them to your dad, and I don't even remember the circumstances, Brian. It was just kind of a casual, I got these that I took, and he went, "Oh my God, those are great. Where's the negatives?"
Well, before you even did that, Bob, I saw the images, and it was 2 of the greatest shots I had ever seen of Muhammad Ali. There's been a lot of sports broadcast photographs that have been done, but these were really classic, up close,
Very candid.
from a great angle. And I didn't know Bob had taken them, so I said, "Wow, these are exceptional." And I said, "Where did you buy these?" He said, "I didn't." Go ahead, Bob. Tell him the story.
Well, Ali and I had become friends as dating back to '73, and Ali used to call me he would call me. Muhammad Ali called into my show whenever he wanted.
Wow.
He had a private line that we'd given him, and he lived in Chicago at the time. And every couple of weeks, and Mark Askin was producing back then, and I'd be sitting there, and lines would be lighting up, and all of a sudden he'd come on and he'd say, "Ali on line 4."
Oh, wow.
And I go, "Hi, champ, how are you?" And he'd go into one of his, "I love your show and I admire your style, but the pay was so cheap, I won't be back for a while."
He
he'd do
sounds
one
like
of
Eddie
those.
Shack a little bit. Like he would get along with Eddie Shack, those two.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of relationship we had. So then in '83, Ali, I think it was '83, might have been '84, Ali was getting ready for what would be his last fight, and ironically, it was with Trevor Berbick, who was the Canadian heavyweight champion at the time. And the fight was in the Bahamas. And I went down to the Bahamas, talked to Ali and his people and Bundini Brown, etc., and arranged to get some time with the champ, and who wasn't the champ at that point, by the way. He'd already lost to Larry Holmes.
Yep.
And so we went down. I was at Global TV at the time, took a camera crew down, and there were 4 of us, me, a sound guy, a cameraman, and a producer. And we were an affiliate of ABC in terms of news feeds. And ABC found out that we were going to interview Ali. They tried to go and interview him as well, and Ali turned them down.
Oh, wow.
So they then called me and said, "All right, we have the idea to shoot a piece of you following Ali." And I said, "Well, do whatever you want. I mean, fill your hat. As long as it's okay with the champ, I'm
Sure.
okay with it." So they sent a crew down that when we set up our cameras, wherever we set up our cameras, whether it was the sit-down interview, whether it was Ali training, whether it was Ali exercising, I went for a run with Ali. Well, it was more like a jog.
I was going to say, how did that go?
Well, Ali didn't run exactly like a sprinter.
Did he run
38
backwards
years
though,
of age.
like Apollo Creed and Rocky? I'd imagine.
No, this was all, and it's 4:00 in the morning.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, and Ali said, "You want to come jog with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I found out later nobody had ever been allowed to.
Oh wow.
So I was the first guy to ever do it. And the jog lasted about 5 minutes. So essentially, we had a car, and our cameraman rolled down the window and had the camera outside the car and was driving along beside. Now, mind you, they could have walked as fast as we were running. But so our cameraman followed Ali and I. And I tried talking to him, but he didn't want to talk while we were running.
The one
And
time he
behind,
doesn't want
on
to
the
talk.
other side of our car was a series of stretch white limousines with ABC had multiple cameras with multiple producers. They had like 20 people there. We had 4. And they shot us shooting Ali. So this went on for the 2 days that we did this. I did my interview, and my camera was here, and ABC's camera was behind my camera. Anyway, this all winds up on Nightline.
Wow.
And back in the day when Nightline was the show, Ted Koppel was the host. Well, the irony is Nightline aired at 11:30 p.m. Sportsline on Global, my show, aired at 11:30 p.m. And I had no idea when they were going to run theirs, and I'd kind of forgotten about it.
Sure.
Turns out that they aired this show this one night, and I didn't even have anybody record it. So, and I always felt funny about asking ABC for a copy of the tape.
I was going to ask.
So I never did. So to this day, I still have the Ali interview piece that we did.
Right. But not theirs with you in it.
I never saw what ABC did.
Oh, that's kind of tragic in a way. I mean, it speaks to the heart of what collecting is and memorabilia is. You know, you mentioned that you're not much of a collector, that you accumulate. And I you know, not to speak for you, but I do feel that one of the reasons people want to get involved in collecting is so that they can be a part of the industry that they love or the sport that they love. You are already so much entrenched in it that maybe that's just not necessary. I mean, your memorabilia,
close to it.
Yeah, your memorabilia is that story.
I'm not comfortable in asking, and I
Sure.
know many people are, but I think it's a personal thing. It really doesn't have that much to do with the fact that I know these people and I interview them. It feels presumptuous to me.
Sure.
And,
you know what, Bob, though, the thing is with people in your profession, there are people that do that. And I think that the athletes, knowing from the athlete's point of view, they think that is unprofessional. I think you took the right tack there, because there's guys that just, announcers and that I know of, that just hound the guys. Like, hey, can you sign this? Can you sign that? And the guys just shake their head, go, "What? You know, it's just so unprofessional. You know, you're here to do your job. Don't try and get autographs on the side." And it's not to say they won't do it if it's, you know, if it's for your kid or something like that or whatever special occasion, but not every time. You imagine the collection that you would have.
Huh.
You know what a Muhammad Ali autograph is worth right now? Thousands of dollars.
I have you know what I have of Ali.
Right.
The pictures that I took, I just got my first 35 millimeter camera before I went down to the Bahamas with Ali. So I decided to take it. I'd never taken a picture before, like maybe with a Kodak Instamatic, you know, back in the day.
We're big on the selfies back then, or what?
I had no idea how to use this camera, and I was just goofing around. And so there I was, and I took a bunch of shots. At the Ali training camp, there was a guy there by the name of Tommy Hearns.
Oh yeah,
who was fighting on the undercard, who nobody had ever heard of.
At that point, no one had heard. Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Nobody had ever heard of him. This is before Duran and Leonard and Hagler, I guess. And there was this tall, skinny kid, and I just saw him in the ring, and he was unique because he was tall and gangly. So I took a picture of him, and I remember that was one of the other pictures that I saw. And I took a couple of pictures of Ali. Well, I brought them home, got the film developed, and I did have 8x10s made of a couple of those pictures. And they immediately went into a drawer and stayed there for, I don't know how long, not quite 20 years.
Wow.
Do you remember, Brian, when we did those Ali things?
It
must have been 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
Probably after Gardunes.
Well, it's more than that.
Yeah.
It might have been 20 years, so it could have been like 2003.
Right at the
when
beginning.
we did those. And Brian had come over to the house for some reason, probably to mooch a beer.
I was going to say, knocking on your door yet again.
Yeah, you know, Brian. So, and I don't remember the circumstances, but I showed him these two pictures, and his eyes got big as saucers and said, "Do you know, we could do some stuff with blah, blah." He says, "Where are the negatives?" And I said, "Brian, I got no idea. I didn't even know I had the photographs." And I looked all over the place, couldn't find the negatives. So Brian took the two 8x10s, and I don't know what you did with them. Did you
Scan them,
create negatives, or did you just
scan them.
blow them up?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
We scanned them. You can do that, and then you can digitally increase the size. It wasn't as easy as it is today.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say now that's something you can do at home, but back then it was finding a specific source that was able to do that.
And the key is to get them blown up so that they don't pixelate.
Yes,
so you
exactly.
get them nice and clear.
Right. Anyway, so your dad did that, and then we decided to do 250 copies of each one. And the hassle with getting Ali, by that point, Ali was, you couldn't really talk to him.
Right.
He couldn't talk anymore. And I'd lost communication with him and touch with him. So your dad convinced me to sign them. So I signed them as the photographer.
Right.
And hand numbered them. And they sold out in no time.
Yeah.
Like a couple of weeks, I think, Brian.
Yeah. Well, the last one, so we kind of slow played it a little bit, but a couple months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what, Bob? Here's the thing, because it was interesting. One of the first shows that we did, we talked about with Daryl Sittler on the first show about how the memorabilia business evolved, where it used to be the artist that did the painting, and they would sign it. And then Daryl came along and did a painting an artist did a painting, and we had Daryl sign it. So that was one of the first pieces of art that the athlete signed, and that took off, and it was one of the forerunners to the memorabilia business.
Yeah.
And years later, we did an about face. We didn't get the athlete to sign it. We got the artist, and that was you.
Right.
And that was good enough, along with the piece, to create otherwise it's not just a photograph. It's a good photograph.
Right.
But everybody wanted your signature. And if you remember, we made a limited edition out of it.
Yeah,
And, I'm going to try and dig the one
too.
up because I've got one tucked away somewhere. I tried to find it before this show.
We'll try to throw a photo of that piece in the video if you're watching this on YouTube right now.
What Bob's not saying is how good the photo was for an amateur. He was below
for an amateur. You want that qualifier in there?
You want to know the secret?
Go ahead.
If you look carefully at that photograph, and I unashamedly point this out to everybody. My out of focus thumb is in the bottom left corner of one of the photographs.
Is that where you signed too? Just to make sure they know it's you?
No. I mean, I'm telling you, I knew nothing about taking a picture.
Right.
I was as amateur as you could possibly be. I had no idea how to work this camera. And somehow I got my thumb in front of the lens. And when I took the picture, I didn't even notice it, except that there was, in the bottom left corner, there was this blur.
Yeah, I remember that.
It just looks like somebody walked by or whatever. You can't tell it's a thumb. But that's what it is. It's my thumb.
Yeah.
But
it
up
legitimizes
close,
the amateurism that was used to take the photograph.
That's fair, yeah.
But he caught Muhammad Ali with a look on his face. It was obvious that he knew you. The look when he was looking down, because you were, he was up in the ring, I believe, right?
Yeah, he was in the ring. I was down below, and I was looking up at him. And he was actually in his corner between rounds of sparring.
Right.
So I'm going to try and dig that up so we can show the fans.
It's a very
touch
neat
on
image, yeah.
A little bit. How much time we got?
We can give it another 5 minutes or so. Yeah.
So I did want to get into our Gardunes episode a little bit because that was fun.
Gardunes. So Gardunes, for the listener who doesn't know, is a restaurant that was opened up by my dad, Brian, his brother, Alan, and Doug Gilmore was a partner as well. It was opened just across the street from Maple Leaf Gardens.
Well, here's how that evolved, because I remember, and we talked about this, I would pull up to Maple Leaf Gardens, which was one of my accounts.
Right.
Leave the car right outside because no policeman would give you a ticket because Harold Ballard didn't want any policeman to screw up his ticket sales because the box office was just in the door, right? So none of the cops would ever give you a ticket, but nobody knew this but a few people. I would leave the car there for hours. But anyways, I pull up in front, and I look across the street, and I see a restaurant that's gone bankrupt there. And I'm thinking, this would be a great spot. How can you not go do something right with a restaurant right across from Maple Leaf Gardens? But to make it work, what if we had a couple of guys to promote it? Because I opened a restaurant before, but having some people on board that would guarantee the success besides just the Wednesday nights and the Saturday nights.
Right.
And the first call I made was to Bob.
There you go.
Said, "You interested in getting into the restaurant business?" He said, "What are you talking about?"
I said, no.
He said,
So
you never said no to any idea until you heard it out,
Let's set the
Bob.
stage. There's another knock at the door, middle of the night. Dad shows up.
Yeah, I just said to Bob, he says, in fairness, he didn't say no. He said, "What do you got in mind?"
Sure.
And I said, "You know what, Bob, I'm thinking this restaurant's got to be successful right across from Maple Leaf Gardens. I kind of know Doug Gilmore because we've started to do some business with him. I'm thinking..."
Guest on the podcast in a couple of weeks, by the way. Yeah.
Right. And I said, "I'm thinking that the three of us as a core element could attract a lot of attention to this bar.
Sure.
I'm a promoter. I can build it. But Bob's got the radio show with hundreds of thousands of listeners.
Yeah.
And Doug Gilmore is the hottest thing since sliced bread in Toronto. Three of us own that bar. And we actually put it together. Eh, Bob?"
Yeah, we did. And it had a fair life. I mean, if Maple Leaf Gardens hadn't shut down, it'd probably be still there today, huh?
Well, that was the plan. We said this was 93, I believe, and it said, everybody said, "Well, what are you going to do if they sell the gardens?" And I said, "By that time, we'll have made our money." And it was in an area that was a predominantly gay area around the gardens. I said, "Well, we can turn it into a gay bar because that's where the money is too. I mean, there's very successful gay bars in the neighborhood, or we just sell it." And so we ended up selling it in 99 because, obviously the weekly business wasn't there.
Sure.
Every Wednesday and Saturday, it was filled season long. And then with Bob's help.
Well, if you remember, Brian, we had to have two seatings for dinner.
Right.
We had a 5:30 seating and a 6:30 seating. And if you came to the 5:30 seating, we kicked your ass out by 6:30 to let the next group in. And after the game, it was packed.
Probably one of the best openings because Wayne Gretzky just shut his restaurant down.
Remember who played?
And that happened.
Remember who played at the opening?
Yeah. It was like
I was there as well.
We had some of the greatest names in sport and entertainment
Musicians
at the time. Who did we have, Bob?
Well, you tell me. I want to see if you remember. I know.
We had the Bare Naked Ladies.
There you go. That's what it was.
So
who were hot as a pistol at the time.
And they got up on stage, and Doug Gilmore got up. I mean, there was a few pops that everybody had. But
I think didn't Grapes get up there too?
Grapes
at some
was
point?
there. You did your show from there that night with Jim Hunt. And then, because in that private back room that we had for celebrities and that. And then we had a stage set up. The Meteors, which was a local band, played throughout the evening. But the way I did this too is you called a few friends, which are slam dunk, but I remember trying to get as many big name people for that opening as I could. And what I did was I'd phone up management for the Bare Naked Ladies and I'd never get a call back. And then it hit me. I said, "This is what I got to do." I'd phone somebody and say, "Can I speak to so and so?" And they said, "Oh, he's not here right now. Who's speaking?" I said, "Oh, it's Doug Gilmore. I'm opening a restaurant, and I'd like to know if your client would like to show up for the opening. We'll send an invitation."
Did you change your voice when you did this, or was
No,
it was just you?
They don't know.
Sure.
So I'd say, "Here's my number. Call me back." And sure enough, 20 minutes later, that guy would, because Doug was so hot. Of course. At the time. That guy, the manager, would call the band, and the band would say, "Yeah, I'm going." I'd get the call back from the manager 20 minutes later and say, "Is Doug Gilmore there?" I said, "Oh, no, this is the restaurant. Doug just left. But if you're interested, I can pass on the message." And that's how we got the Bare Naked Ladies there and a ton of other celebrities. But Bob was instrumental in getting some of the bigger names there.
Now, here's a question, not to put you on the spot, but why Doug Gilmore and not Bob McCowan? You could have used his name.
Bob was doing his own thing.
Okay.
He was bringing in. He brought in most.
He was
of the
doing his
guys.
work. Yeah.
There was a couple of key people that I wanted there for entertainment purposes.
Well, there is a picture. I do have a picture of opening night at Gardunes on my wall here.
Well,
And of course you stuck your face in there too. But it's you and I and Grapes in the picture.
Grapes did your show that night. I cannot. There were some other
Yes,
key
he did.
things that happened in that restaurant. I remember they had the
WWF at the time came in and did they before one of their events that they had at Maple Leaf Garden had a lot of the athletes show up and do performances, quote-unquote performances, the wrestlers themselves before heading over and doing the show at the Gardens.
Remember the Undertaker walked in?
Do I remember? Dad,
Well,
come
they were
on.
big wrestling
This
Well,
was
how about Meatloaf? Do you remember Meatloaf?
Yes.
Night?
100%.
They did the
Meatloaf was big, and Dougie and I went over and we got seats and we watched the concert, and then the record company, I believe, Brian,
Yep.
booked our restaurant for the post-show party, and Meat did come over for I want to say about 10 or 15 minutes. Did he
Signed
not?
some autographs.
Is that your
for
recollection?
sure. I still got an album signed by him. I was a big Meatloaf
Oh, did you?
fan.
Well, see, that's you. You
Yeah.
got albums signed. I got nothing.
No, but you won't ask. I will.
Yeah, no shame.
I'm
no
not
shame.
a broadcaster.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
We're kind of winding down here. As always, Bob, we appreciate you coming on, and hopefully down the line we'll get you on again. Anything you want to plug before we get going here? Because our show has a ton of reach. You might be able to reach a new audience through us.
Well, just our own podcast. The Bob McCowan podcast is available wherever you buy your podcasts, or get them for free, more accurately. And you can watch it on YouTube, and we have a new facility where people can watch it now. And with these things on the internet, you can watch them on your big ass TV now if you want.
Absolutely.
And in addition to your podcast, Life, Love, and Lipstick is a really interesting podcast with two ladies who are both divorced with kids, and what's life like in the single world for a mature woman. And they talk about it every day. And I can't think of anything else that I need to promote.
good.
Oh, I do own this winery, Stony Ridge.
I'll tell you what. I had a great afternoon there with you. One day we drove down. My wife Lori and I, and you hosted us down there. And then we went over to the casino afterwards and stayed the night, so we didn't have to drive home. So it was great.
Yeah,
Good time.
it's only about
Beautiful,
20 it's only about
beautiful
20 minutes
winery.
to-
If you're ever down in the Niagara region, you got to check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So keep
Yeah.
an eye out. Obviously,
we do the hip. We do the wines for the Tragically Hip and for Glass Tiger, and more of those to come.
If you
in
can
the,
get your hands
in the
on them,
next few
because they're
weeks.
sold out right away.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, keep an eye out. Fadoo Productions obviously has a great roster of podcasts to go check out. There's going to be a new launch of the website where you can find lists of all of those, including Life, Love, and Lipstick, which Bob
that's
just
coming
talked
soon.
about. Yeah, coming soon. So once again, for the sign-off and for Frameworth, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. For Brian Aaronworth, President of Frameworth, and myself, Mikey Aaronworth, this is us signing off. Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions, executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.